Now, Germany is one of the countries which received global praise for its handling of the initial wave of coronavirus. Now, the European country is facing a new challenge, that's maintaining that level of vigilance as cases decline and public life resumes some semblance of normalcy. There is some growing pushback, though, against restrictions, which William Grocroft, with our partners DW in Berlin, is here to tell us more about. First of all, he's going to tell us how Germany is finding that balance between social and economic pressures as well as public health needs. Hello, William, it's good to have you. So do tell us about how Germany...
Good to be here,
right.
To be speaking with you.
Tell us about how Germany is achieving that balance.
Well, it remains to be seen if it really is achieving that balance. That is the question that everybody is asking themselves, public officials, health officials, and of course ordinary people. As Germany, like many other countries, starts to loosen the restrictions. Angela Merkel was before Parliament today again repeating what she said many times, which is, let's not give up the success that we've had so far. Let's build on that success, and how much of a tragedy it would be if Germany were to start going backwards and start seeing renewed infection, a wider outbreak again. Now that people are starting to go back to work, that shops are opening, that some school classes are going back to school, and there's even talk about how and when to open up preschools. There is this major challenge, though, because you have a lot of competing interests. You have parents who want to get their kids back to school, but you have teachers saying, we can't really do that. We don't know how to maintain the safety measures and provide a safe atmosphere for children. The preschool teachers, it's even a more difficult situation because you need more space for fewer children, so there's just simply not the space and the resources for it. And many of the teachers themselves are in an at-risk group, meaning they can't go back to work because they might be exposed to the virus and could have very terrible consequences for them. So there's a lot of competing interests here, a lot of conflicts within society, and of course to balance on the other side with the public health situation as the reproduction number fluctuates around one being the magic number to show just how fast or slow the outbreak is spreading in Germany. Which many epidemiologists and public health experts are saying purely from the perspective of the outbreak, it's much too soon to be opening up and relaxing the restrictions.
That's certainly a debate we're having here as well. But right this afternoon, before I came to talk to you, it was a disturbing situation in one of the towns in the mining community where the youth actually went to block the entrance of an isolation center. What sort of public support are German authorities receiving with the restrictions that they're putting in place and with the responses that they're putting in place to coronavirus?
Yes, that example you gave from your neck of the woods sounds very similar to what some people, or the way some people are reacting in my neck of the woods. There is a small but very vocal minority of extreme right, extreme left political people from the extremes of that political spectrum who are taking to the streets, sometimes illegally, violating the pandemic restrictions, violating even the rules for how to form a proper demonstration on the street, to show that they are upset, that they feel that their rights are being violated, to think that there is some kind of conspiracy afoot that is keeping their rights repressed. But of course, public health officials, and I should say government officials, are saying we would very much like to return to normalcy just like everybody else would, but the health situation just does not allow for it right now. But it should be said that the majority of Germans are still supporting the government. They still understand the need for these restrictions, or I should say the slower easing into some kind of normalcy. Of course, we're down from the highs of 80 or 90% of support that we saw earlier in this pandemic crisis. Now about 2/3 of Germans, polls show, support the government, trust the government, believe that the measures are appropriate. But at the same time, it's interesting to note that a majority of Germans also fully expect the restrictions to continue to loosen and to continue to ease up. So that will be an interesting potential conflict going forward, both trusting the government in their decisions, but also expecting that the government will continue down this path of loosening restrictions. And if that doesn't happen, if the outbreak means that we have to start tightening up restrictions again, what that might do to public support is something that we'll just have to see develop over the next several weeks.
What sort of concerns are public health experts raising with some of these protests? For example, we've seen some of those protests in the United States of America where some of them want restrictions to be eased. We haven't seen such protests here in Ghana, but we've seen them in areas where isolation centers have been set up and the people don't want them to be there. What are public experts saying? Because that's also an avenue for the spread of the disease if one person has it.
Yes, absolutely. There's a great concern that in these large groups of protests, again, there were more than 1,200 people gathered illegally in Berlin for a protest on the weekend, 3,000 in Munich, 10,000 in Stuttgart, also protests happening all around the country. And there is concern that these could be vectors for the disease with so many people gathering at once, not abiding by the distancing standards, not really wearing masks. And being aggressive towards police. It also puts state workers and authorities at risk for them doing their jobs. So far, government officials are not too worried that this kind of aggression, this kind of protest action that we're seeing is really going to spread because, as I said, the majority of Germans are still behind the government and still understand the reason for this exceptional situation that we're in now in society. But you only have to go back to the 2015 migration crisis to understand that at that time, a lot of the right-wing sentiment and the populist sentiment going on in Germany at the time really found its voice in that moment and became what we have today, where we have an established right-wing party, far-right party in parliament. So what the political consequences of this crisis are going to be is really something we can't see yet, whether this will become whether this will remain just a protest of the people on the fringes of the far right and the far left, conspiracy theorists, or whether this will become a true movement. That's something that public officials are going to have to keep an eye on very closely as the pandemic is continued to be dealt with over the next weeks and months.
William, thank you for that update. William Glocroft is correspondent with our partners DW. He's joining us all the way from Berlin with those updates.